Hi, my name is Eric Jenks. I'm a photographer based out of upstate New York. I do a wide variety of photography, anything from commercial work for businesses and schools to product photography, concert photography, journalism, portraiture, landscapes. Basically, if it's something I can do with my camera, I like to take photos of it. I'm here to talk to you today about the Leica R8, which is a wonderful film camera that was released in the mid-1990s. Now, this was a little bit of a controversial camera when it was released. It was the first design for an SLR that Leica had done since the 1970s. All of their other R series cameras from the R3 through the R7 were designed in conjunction with Minolta. Now, the overall looks of the R8 were just very different from other manual focus cameras of the era. I personally like it. It's one of those things where it can look a little ungainly if you're just looking at a photo of it, but the moment that you're holding it in your hands, all of the controls really fall nicely underneath your fingertips. It is a manual focus camera, which is something a little bit different for the mid-90s. A lot of times when you see cameras from that era, they are autofocus if they are an SLR. And it was, unfortunately, the series was discontinued in the mid-2000s as Leica focused on their M series. It has seen a little bit of a renaissance lately. The R series glass, I happen to have a 28mm Elmarit, which is an f2.8 lens in Leica nomenclature on the camera right now. But I also am lucky enough to own the 50mm Summicron, which is an f2 lens, the 35mm f2.8 Elmarit, and the kind of a chunky lens, but super nice, is the 100mm Apo Macro f2.8 100mm lens. So this lens is apochromatic, meaning that it focuses all rays of light to one single point. So there's not a lot of aberration, if any, to the lens. It's super sharp, and it is a wonderful macro, but it's also just a great general purpose lens. It's a little hefty to carry around, but when you see the results from it, it's worth it. So why Leica? I've been a Leica shooter for over a decade. I was actually given my first Leica, a camera from the 1930s by a professor when I was in college, and I got hooked. From there, I moved on to the M series. Right here I have my Leica M3 from the late 1950s, and I still shoot with a Leica M240, which is one of their digital cameras. The thing with rangefinders is that you don't focus through the lens. You can't focus quite as closely as you can with a SLR, and it also doesn't let you have as accurate of focusing with longer lenses. So there is a place for an SLR in my life, even though I love to shoot with my Leicas, with my M series, the rangefinder cameras. Enter the R series. It has a very similar look to the glass. A lot of the designs are not quite the same between the two series. The Leica lenses for the rangefinder are much smaller than the equivalent lens that you'll see with the SLR, but it's definitely the same genetics, and I just love the way that they render. It's also nice, all of these lenses are compatible with an adapter and a EVF on my Leica M240. So I can still use these beautiful lenses on a digital body. So it kind of gives me a little bit of more incentive to enjoy them. That is one cool thing about the Leica R8, is it is one of the only cameras from the film era that had a digital back made for it. And so they are hard to find. They are still kind of crazy expensive. But if you do want to convert the R8 into a digital body, you can. Now, why? The other nice thing, I guess, about the R series is that it is way more affordable to get into than the M series lenses. I got my 50mm lens for around $350. The equivalent in an M series lens is going to be probably $1,500 used. Same thing goes for all of the glass. It's just less expensive. This is maybe the one exception. This is an expensive lens because it is the macro. It's a little bit harder to find, and it's just a beautiful lens, so people go for it. The other thing, I do still like to shoot film. When you look at the R8, you know, the equivalent camera that you'd be seeing in the M series is the M7. You know, we're having an aperture priority camera body. This does also have shutter priority and full program, as well as a really nifty flash mode that I don't know if I'll ever actually use. So talking maybe $500 if you're looking for an R8 body versus the M7, which is, you know, $2,500 to $3,500 depending on where you're looking. So it's a bargain if you're looking to get that Leica look. It is a little heavy, but I have big hands and I would rather have a hefty camera that gives me a little bit more stability when I go to shoot with it than something that is a little bit too light and a little flimsy. And I honestly have no complaints about how the camera works. I think it was ahead of its time. You know, you see autofocus cameras from Canon and Nikon and Minolta, and they go for very little money from the 90s. They're just basically throwaway at this point. I think the people who are shooting film enjoy the process of film. They don't need speed. And so when you shoot manually, you slow yourself down. You really kind of think about what your composition is going to be. And I think that is one of the highlights that you get when you're shooting with the Leica bodies. You really have a chance to think about what you're doing with them. My M3, for example, doesn't even have a built-in light meter. So you have to meter outside of the camera body, transfer that over to your lens and to the shutter, the camera, and then shoot. Honestly, I find that freeing. I find it, you know, really nice that I can kind of set it and forget it. I don't have to worry about the camera being in an aperture priority or a program mode and changing what I wanted it to do for that scene. You know, I figure out what the range is for my highlights, I figure out what my range is for my shadows, set it, and I know that the rest of my shots are all going to be the same, which is really helpful when I get into post and I'm doing editing. I do work with a hybrid flow. I get my film developed by the Darkroom Lab out in California. I'm not sponsored by them, but I do think that they do an amazing job with their scanning and with their developing. So if you're looking for getting your developing done, I would suggest them as a great resource. I'm open to questions. I kind of, you know, this is my first video that I'm doing for camera reviews. You know, when I shoot with the R8, if I have any issues with it, I'd say the auto ISO, the DX setting when you put in your film, it's a little flaky, so I typically just set ISO manually. And other than that, I do have a little trouble focusing wider lenses with it compared to shooting something like my M series. It doesn't quite snap into focus as quickly as it does with a longer lens or with the rangefinder on my M3 or my M2. Other than that, I really don't have any complaints. You know, the images that I get from it are what I'm looking for. I know that I'm working with a series that has amazing image quality. I know that they are built to outlast me, my son, and any grandchildren that I might have, that it's a camera system that I can hand down to the next generation. There is always that worry and concern that, you know, this is a camera body that has electronics built into it. What's going to happen one day when they pass away? For $500, it's an expense, but it's not like the M7 where you've invested close to $3,000 and you have to worry about it turning into a brick. I think I'm hopeful, at least, that mine has a lot of years left in it, and I'm looking forward to enjoying it. If this is something that you've enjoyed, while I've been speaking, I've been showing some of the photos that I've taken with the camera over the past year. Let me know if there's something that you don't agree with about the camera, or that you've had experience with. I'd love to hear it. Leave it down in the comments section. And if you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, have a good night.